Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese, and I'm coming to you from Music City, USA, with the podcast that takes a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Alicia Lowry Lewis. She's a therapist in Franklin, Tennessee, and is a unique guest on the show in that she's my supervisor. What's a supervisor do to a therapist? Well, think about it like a Jedi Master to apprentice type of relationship. And this week, we're jumping in our Wayback Machine because Alicia brought with her the 1991 movie, The Father of the Bride. Thanks so much to all of you that have written in questions to our Ask a Therapist segment on the show. It's been fun to talk with my guests about the issues you've brought forth. We're going to put that segment on pause for a few episodes to try and retool it a bit and then hopefully do a relaunch later. I don't want to be the jerk, but I'm the man with two brains about dirty, rotten scoundrels taking their planes, trains, and automobiles to see their three amigos. It would be my blue heaven to eat some mixed nuts while Sergeant Bilko and I were the house sitter for you and talked about the Pink Panther while you're the out-of-towners. I know it's complicated, so tell your father of the bride and your baby mama that it's the big year. Wait, did I get them all? Yeah? Okay. Let's go ahead, dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. So what was it that got you to therapy as a career? Like, why therapy?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to my mind was fifth grade. My mom tells a story that I came home one day from fifth grade, and I guess I was kind of exasperated and not fun to be with. And she was like, what's going on? Why are you being so grumpy? And I started telling her about all these problems that my friends had. Well, so-and-so's parents are getting divorced, and so-and-so's arguing with their mom. And I don't have any more to give, I think is what I said.
Something that sounds
really
so dramatic for a fifth grader.
I think it was dramatic. I think that's why that's a story in my family, is it was really dramatic. And I don't remember that conversation, but I do remember some of those things that were going on. When my mom tells that story, I can relate to that time period in my life. And I think maybe it is a desire. Part of my personality is I like intensity, and maybe I was drawn to intense things that were going on in people's lives. But I think I've always really loved deep connection. I think I've always loved knowing what was going on with someone under the surface. Mm-hmm. I've always appreciated depth, and so sometimes that means hard things, mm-hmm. And so as I grew up, I didn't always want to be a therapist. I certainly in fifth grade wouldn't have said I want to be a therapist. I wanted to be in the performing arts, another dramatic career. But by the time I was in undergrad, I think I would have said similar to what you said. I want a job where I spend my life talking about important things. Mm-hmm. That's probably how I would have said it. So that could have been doing the news. That could have been a job in ministry. That could have been therapy. That could have been teaching. But I knew I wanted a job where I talked about important things. Important as defined by me, of course.
Yeah. Well, here's what's interesting about those examples you just gave is that two of them, news, and then there was another one towards the end, I can't remember what it was. It's literally just talking.
Teaching.
And then teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other two, it's talking and listening.
Yes.
And so, I mean, yes. I think, based on what you're saying, you loved deep things, mm-hmm. and you really wanted to spend your time talking. I mean, therapy is a great fit for that.
It's a great fit. I'm really curious. I'm genuinely, authentically curious and always have been. And I'm a better talker than I am a listener. Being a good listener has been something that I've had to practice a lot. over the years. But I'm also genuinely curious about people. And so my undergrad's in English. I find a lot of therapists are either English or psychology. Not everyone,
Yeah.
but those are two really common ones. And I think for me, that draw towards story and symbolism and seeing patterns. And, English is a major where you get to learn about history and politics and art and religion, and all of that comes together in literature. And that was a great fit for me. I'm interested in all those things. I think by the time I finished undergrad, I think if I had been raised in a less conservative religious environment, I probably would have thought I want to be a pastor.
Huh.
But that just was not.
Yeah, a possibility.
That was not a possibility. The closest thing was that you could marry a pastor, which meant, of course, if you were 20, 21, 22, you would marry a youth pastor. Yeah, it just didn't ever occur to me that a woman could do that until I was much older. I didn't even know. Like, I probably went to college with people that had women as youth pastors, but that never came up.
Especially if they were Methodist or Episcopalian
or Lutheran and I just didn't have any concept of that. So, so by the time I graduated undergrad and was moving to LA to marry my musician boyfriend, I knew I wanted to go down the counseling path. But long story short, I tried to go to grad school 4 different times for some version of educational psychology or community counseling or clinical psychology or something. And it wasn't until 2007, I graduated from undergrad in the early 90s, and it wasn't until 2007 that the pieces came together and I was actually able to make it happen. So
wow.
Yeah. It feels like a grace now. I think
is that just because you had not assembled enough of yourself to be able to really, really do that grad school journey?
There are 2 ways I think about it. One is that life kept interrupting. And maybe the flip side of that coin is that God protected potential clients from me.
Yeah.
Because I did need to live some life. I did need to face my own fear and shame. I did need to experience some humility before I was in a position to offer anyone anything.
Oh, yeah.
And on the front side, I didn't know any of that, of course. And so I think I probably would have been really harmful to people. I mean, I wasn't a bad person. I don't mean that, but you're right. I did not have enough of myself. And I didn't even know that. I didn't even know what that meant. It would be years before someone would say to me, you have to have yourself before you can give yourself. And I nodded and was like, I have no idea what that means. Ultimately, what got me to grad school the 4th time was my own therapy. I loved therapy, and I loved what I was learning about myself. I loved the insight and the healing. And when I graduated from grad school and started the supervision process, I had a little bit of a rough start. It took me a while to find the right supervisor for me, because that's about fit too, just like therapy is. But once I found the right supervision, I loved supervision. It was the best time of my week. I loved, when I started grad school, I really thought I would go all the way through and teach. I wanted to get my PhD and teach. And then I found supervision, and it's so relational. It's really teaching in relationship differently. And I loved it. I loved being a supervisee. I loved talking about cases, exploring them with other people in group supervision. I loved that. I just found it really life-giving.
So, I mean, it sounds like in your process of knowing yourself more, connecting with yourself, and by doing that, learning about your longings, desires, and I don't have a word, but the things that like fuel you, the things that light you up, that this was just kind of a natural fit, a natural progression. That's a good place for us to jump into the movie. Tell me what movie that you picked to bring today.
I picked one of my all-time favorites, Father of the Bride.
Father of the Bride. Do you know what year it came out?
1991.
I know. That's crazy, right?
Yeah, the very end. I looked for the release date because I thought it came out in 92 because that's when I got married, but 91, December of 91.
Which means, so it's 28 years old.
Don't say that out loud. Just keep that to yourself.
I don't do well in math, so I might be wrong in that.
No, that's right.
But like 01, 11.
It'll be 28 years in December.
Yeah, because the version that we rented on iTunes said the 25th anniversary. And I was like, holy cow. So that must have come out a little while ago. I was shocked. I just learned that the movie Alien is 40 this year.
Oh my gosh.
And it didn't make any sense to me because I thought, how is a movie like that 40 years old?
I know.
40 years old, I would say. That's a black and white movie, but that's not.
No,
Yeah.
but I get what you're saying.
So
yeah.
So you said it's
a lot of my friends have been married 25 years. So, wow. I mean, my sort of cohort, we were all getting married around that time, 91, 92. Most of my friends from college. And so that was perfect. And then we all kind of started having babies when the second one came out. And
oh, yeah.
So they feel really personal and, yeah, very close to my heart. Those
so movies. You said it's a favorite. Why is it a favorite?
Yeah, when I was I hadn't watched it in a while. And, because I think I own it on VHS. So when I watched it last night, I just kept thinking, has any man ever loved me as much as George Banks loves Annie? Yeah. I mean, there's just such a tenderness, and you get to see that in the movie. Of course, he acts crazy too, but you get to see those moments where his heart just soars or sinks, or and he's just so open toward her. And I know a lot of great daddies, but I don't know that we get to see that up close very often, that kind of love.
So is it that, you watch it and because I remember when we were talking about picking a movie, I gave you the two questions, like what movie when you watch it makes you want to be in relationship, not necessarily a relationship, but in relationship, yeah. And which movie makes you want to be alone forever, just kind of as like prompts,
right,
to think about it. So when you're watching this, is it you going, yeah, relationship?
For sure. Yeah, I want to be that daughter. I want to be that wife. I mean, there's something about the George Banks character, even though he acts like a nut, that you just think, oh, I want to be in a relationship with somebody that is that passionate and tender.
It's interesting you said
devoted
to be the wife too, because there is that part where before the wedding, Diane Keaton's coming down the stairs and he is in awe of her.
So good.
And I even just thought, yeah, that's cool. Like, it's so cool that they didn't even just make this him focusing on the daughter and that kind of thing, but like in the relationships around him. And you have that moment where he's like tender with his son. The son is practicing walking in the hallway and he just gets there, puts his feet alongside him. He's like, all right, left, middle.
Yeah,
like that,
so
right,
sweet.
middle. Yeah.
One of my favorite moments is when he's in jail and Nina comes in to kind of scold him about how he's making Annie's life miserable. And she's right in the middle of scolding him and getting him to repeat, that he's not going to be such a pill anymore. And you just see his face soften and he says, I love you, Nina. Oh, it just makes me want to cry.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's his recognition that like he needs her to be a part of him.
She is his person.
Yeah.
She is his person. And he trusts her, right? Like they've had this sort of quote unquote arguing about money and the wedding and, what's going to happen. And it's sort of, the funny parts.
Yeah.
But then this tenderness where you see how much history they have together, how much partnership, how much he trusts her, relies on her. leans
I love
into
that word
her.
partnership for that.
Yeah.
Because I think at the beginning of that scene, she can come off as being corrective or instructive.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, in that moment, he realizes it's not that. What
Mm-hmm.
she's doing is reminding me of what I know is true.
Right.
And I need that so I don't go off the rails.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, when you're like in jail because you stole hot dog buns, you're off the rails.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's funny, but also, yeah, you just see that shift in him where he's like a dog with a bone. He's like holding on to sort of his position. And then you just see that shift.
Mm-hmm.
And then she smiles and makes him still repeat before she'll kiss him. Yes.
Yeah.
But there's just that to me is one of the most tender moments, is just his softening toward her, even as he's standing behind bars.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think he has that with Annie in the movie too.
Yes.
For me, it's, when she gets the blender.
Yes.
And all of that. And
Oh,
all of
my
a sudden he moves out of position of being, the only word I can think of is antagonist, but an opponent of the marriage to a proponent of his daughter.
Right.
And because of that, and this is just a quality of relationships that I think took me so long to get onto, because he loves her so much and she loves him, Mackenzie. What's his first name?
Brian. Mm-hmm.
Because she loves Brian so much. Mm-hmm. It's the transitive I don't know if I can, claim credit for this, but it's the transitive property of relationships, because now he cares for Brian because he sees how much she cares for him.
Yes.
So his stance softens towards him.
And he also sees how much Brian cares for her.
Yeah.
When they go to the bar and, he's a weepy mess and he's just heart open toward George, even though he's just heard from Annie that Brian knows that he kind of took the bank book and threw it in the pool. And right. Brian knows all of that. And so, like, here's this crazy man that's about to be my father-in-law. And he did something that was not very cool. And still, he just pours his heart out to George at the bar and asks for his help and totally affirms George's place in her life. And, it's just such a tender... the men in this movie are all really tender, right? Brian's dad, George. We get to see a lot. You can tell a woman wrote part of that, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that was a sexist thing to say, but we get to see all their tender parts as well as their strength. And I love that. I think that
well, and I would
that
argue,
makes me want to be in a relationship.
Yeah, let's go against toxic masculinity for a minute, because I would argue that is their strength.
Yes,
is that their ability to be vulnerable.
Absolutely, yeah.
Not having those be exclusive from each other. I'm not strong,
right?
And I'm tender.
Yes,
I'm both, and I'm strong because I'm tender.
Yes,
and I'm tender because I'm strong.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So
hearts on sleeves, and they all end up with amazing women who love them. And I realize it's a movie and someone wrote it, but there is sort of a sense of, it really does highlight the bonds of attachment and family life and love for one another. And I think, how could you watch that movie and not want to be in a relationship?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
it really it's so inviting to the idea of being connected.
And one thing I appreciated about it is, I think, you can have movies where they'll show relationships, or maybe a person in a relationship that always gets it right. And that doesn't feel very real to me. Well, I know it's not real, but I probably a better description would be I don't identify with, or I'm not drawn towards that very much. Yeah. Then you have the opposite. You have movies where, they always get it wrong.
Right.
And I don't really get pulled towards that either. And I think in this one you have the demonstration of secure attachment. You have the demonstration of healthy relationships. And in that, everybody gets some stuff wrong. Everybody gets some stuff right.
Yep.
And that feels a little more real to me.
Yeah. And you see character development. You see evolution. You see transformation, like you were talking about, between, George being antagonistic toward the relationship, oppositional, and then moving to this integrated place of including Brian and the family and rooting for their relationship because he sees the love between them and wants the best for her. In that beginning part where she is at the table and she says she met a man in Rome and she's getting married. He sort of loses consciousness at that point, right?
As demonstrated by all of a sudden she's depicted as a kid in front of him.
7-year-old in pigtails.
He leaves
right?
the present.
He does.
Yeah.
He loses consciousness, and it takes him a while to get it back. He's really being directed by what's happening under the surface, right? His fear, his sadness about the sense of loss of her, the sense of being out of control of what's happening in her life for really the first time, maybe at that level. And it takes him a good long time, which of course is what we get to enjoy as entertainment, is all his antics. But it takes him a good long time to come back to himself, to reconnect to himself. And then he's able to connect to her again, to connect to Brian. And maybe it's him falling in the pool and acting crazy at his new in-laws' house that sort of brings him back around as well, right? I mean, when they have that conversation in her bedroom and he realizes she knows now, right? Like Brian's let the cat out of the bag that he made a fool of himself at breakfast or brunch, even though he said it went well. Maybe that's part of that catalyst as well.
Oh, no, I think in that case, what he realizes is that his relationship is changing with her, but he's not losing her because when Brian said that he did those things, she defended him. And actually this fight, like 50 at least % of it was she not believing Brian when he said that.
Right.
The other part was the blender, but like that part was, that's my dad. You're not going to tell lies about my dad.
The man lies. I love that line.
Yeah.
The man lies.
Let's circle back towards the beginning.
Yeah.
It starts him, I think he's after the wedding has happened and he's doing like a narration as he's sitting amongst all of the decorations that are left over.
Yeah.
And then it kind of goes into the moment when she returns from, I guess, like studying abroad. She was in Rome or something for a while. So she's back. He looks up and it's a different kind of moment of, I think of that moment in the movie She's All That, where she comes down the stairs after a makeover. There's a similar thread. It's a different type though of the coming down the staircase and revealing the beauty of the heroine, if you will.
Yes.
She comes down, and I think both him and Mom kind of comment, you look so different. There's this light shining out of you, and so I think it's kind of this symbolic. This relationship that she now has that they don't know about yet has changed her.
It's already changed.
Yes.
And he makes that face, right?
She's a different person.
She and her mom walk off into the kitchen to get dinner ready, and this close-up of his face where he's like, wait a minute, what's going on?
He makes a lot of faces in this movie.
He makes a lot of faces. I love Steve Martin.
And so they get to the dinner table, and he goes into, it reminds me of like the Danny Tanner clipboard of fun from Full House when they went to Hawaii. He goes into almost like he's going to coordinate the activities kind of thing, because he's like, all right, who wants to go to the Lakers game? Cool. All right, so you're going to that, you're going to that. Now Paul Simon's coming to this. And in that moment, that thought that I had then circles around back later, because he talks about owning a shoe company that makes athletic shoes, and then he's just deciding, I'm going to a Lakers game and a Paul Simon concert in the same week. Right. And then later he complains about the price of the wedding, and I'm like, dude, if you're spending the money to go to the Lakers and go to Paul Simon the same week, I don't think that you should worry about the cost of the wedding, because
their house is paid off.
Yeah, it's giant.
And it's,
like,
in LA.
Clearly you're a big dog. Yeah. I lived in Southern California. It's exorbitantly expensive. But
his wife also owns a business, which we don't see until the next movie, but she owns maybe like a gourmet cooking store, maybe?
Interesting. Oh, like Sir Latab or William Sonoma
Yeah.
kind of.
So
Okay.
so he mentions we each run a business. I think we can coordinate the wedding at one
Okay.
point, but it's not till the next movie we see that. Yeah, and there's more there too, because right in that opening montage, he's talking about living in that house 17 years and it's the perfect house and I don't like change. And then he also starts you can hear him projecting what he's thinking this homecoming's going to be, how they're going to sort of resume a certain kind of life.
We're gonna pick up where we left off.
A lot of planning, a lot of future think, and it includes this bicycle he's had refurbished for her and these tickets, and he's really got an idea of how things are going to be. And then she, at the same time she's sliding down the stairs, and he's thinking something's not right. Something feels off.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
I wondered if she did that because that's what she used to do. Because she's
Yeah.
in a dress and like.
Right, but I mean that look on his face.
Oh, yeah.
Of that
Oh, that's the first.
that instinct that
yeah,
something's
his system's
different.
picking up
Yep.
something real subtle. Yeah.
I don't like change. Something's changed.
Because he says one of the reasons why he loves the house is that everything important has taken place there.
Right.
So at some point, not too long after that scene, I looked at Leigh-Ann and I was like, what do you think he's feeling at this beginning part? So I'll ask you. So like into the dinner conversation where she like says, I've met all this, what do you think he's feeling and experiencing?
Yeah. Well, as he's thinking of her coming home, I just think he's so full of gladness and joy.
Yeah.
Right. I think as a parent of adult children, you have this sense that when you'll see this on Facebook, if you have any older friends, that they'll say all the chicks are in the nest. There's sort of this experience of when all my people are in the same place, I can rest, and you kind of get that sense from him. Like he's so anxious about her flying in. He's ready for her to be safe and sound under his roof. And then immediately there's sort of this, I think when that close up on his face happens, I think there's a little bit of fear. Maybe some curiosity. That's not a feeling, but some curiosity. And then at the table, man, he just kind of gets smacked, right? There's hurt, there's loneliness, there's fear, there's anger.
Why do you think it's hurt though?
I mean, he's been her man, right? He's been the person that occupies the space of the male in her life. And I think in the beginning that can feel really displacing. I remember when my son will be 24 in May. I remember the week he came home from the hospital with his little toothless mouth. And, if you come close to a baby's mouth, they just open wide, right? And I would kiss into that little cave of his mouth, and it would make that sort of hollow sound. And, it was just so great. And I was so in love with him, and just my whole life changed in such a short amount of time, just getting him from in to out, right? I just was head over heels in love. And, of course, I was hormonal. It was the first week he was born. But I remember just crying and saying, he's going to kiss somebody else with this mouth someday.
That early?
That early.
Wow.
That early. And I remember, because I was so in love with him, I already had that sense of loss, the fear of loss of him.
Yeah.
And of course, in my thinking, I knew, well, that'll be right and good for him to kiss someone else someday and for him to love someone else. My second thought was he will love another woman more than me someday. And I knew that when that time came, it would be right. But my heart already felt the loneliness and the loss and the sadness of that. And I didn't dwell on it. I mean, it was a passing thought, a passing feeling. But now he has a person in his life that he might want, well, he does want to marry. They're not engaged yet, but he has his person. And I'm so glad I thought of that the first week he was born, because I've had all these years to prepare my heart. And now that that's happening, there is a sense, a little bit of displacement. But she's not going to be his mom.
Yeah.
she's going to be his partner. She is his partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I think George comes to that in the movie. I think that pang of loss that he feels in the beginning, that fear of losing her, I do think he evolves over the course of the film to realize no one can ever take his place.
Yes, which is affirmed by her calling him in the airport at the end. So I think in the dinner moment, I think it was sadness.
Yes.
I think it was fear.
Yes.
And I think it was a little bit of anger, just because of the unique way that this relationship developed and is getting presented throughout the course of the craziness in the middle of the movie happening. I think it was an unwillingness to deal with the grief of the change of the relationship. And
that's the unconscious part, right?
yeah, it's him doing what he can, because if he focuses on, well, Brian and his parents are weird and not good enough, he doesn't have to make the shift.
That's right.
If he focuses on all the details of the wedding, he doesn't have to make the shift. It's anything I can do to fill up the space to where I don't have to feel this and figure out, well, I should say this, figure out how to feel it. Because I think that, you know, by its very nature, by our very nature, most people are terrible at grief. And so to allow yourself to feel that sadness, because I feel like grief, when it's really engaged with, is like the acceptance of sadness.
Absolutely.
And I think he just had so much trouble with it in there.
Well, he's also shocked, right? And
that's the anger part that I'm thinking.
And fear, right? I think shock, surprise always has an element of fear because it's unexpected and it's, you know, unknown. And I think that's sort of his knee-jerk reaction is to go to those more protective feelings like anger.
To take control, because I think that a human's natural response to fear, because I think all fear has an element of being or thinking that you don't have control over whatever it is. So then the human's natural response to fear is to try to take control. And so I think that in, you know, like one of the very first things he says after she gets done telling the story at the table is, you're not getting married. That's final. And that's kind of the control coming out of, none of this makes sense to me. Therefore, I don't have influence or agency in it. Therefore, I will take my influence and agency and say, you know, if I had a gavel, boom, boom, not getting married. The court has decided. We sentence to you to this.
And that's where you see, too, a lot of the differentiation work that needs to be done in their family, right? She's graduating from college or has just graduated. She's not yet moved really fully, or she's in process of moving from her identity primarily as being a Banks, right? We've all worn the team jersey with her name on the back together, metaphorically. And now I have been moving to Annie. I'm a separate person. I'm connected to my family, but I'm a separate person. And now she's taking this next step to join to a partner, and he's lagging behind her a little bit, right? She's kind of taken off without him. And so of course he's rejecting that idea, and it's almost like he hasn't had time yet to process it. It feels like such a big, shocking announcement that he just goes to fight. Right? If he's going to go fight, flight, or freeze, he just goes fight. And he hasn't had time yet for the dust to settle internally, which, of course, again, is why it makes the movie funny. If she called from Rome 6 months ago and said, I'm dating this guy, and, you know, it might have looked really different. But
or if they gave the scene a 3-hour break for him to go on a walk around the neighborhood and think, like, super long movie and not very entertaining. You know?
We're glad it unfolded this way. That's what makes it fun. But yeah, she's kind of taken off without him in terms of differentiating, and he has to sort of catch up to seeing her as a woman and capable, and seeing their relationship as valid. And even at the dinner table where she brings up that she's a year older than when Mom got married.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you're not.
And then Mom corrects and says, actually, we were married. That's 2 years, and she's a year older than when I had her.
Right.
So I was even younger when I gave birth to her.
Yes. And he's really struggling to sort of get his brain to catch up to all those facts, right? Because he's still seeing her as a 7-year-old in pigtails. And
yeah, there's a from when I was a kid. So I was, 1991, I was 11. But I remember seeing the trailer for it come out and I think I'd seen it, but like there's some kind of like deeply ingrained memory that I have of that part when he sees her as a kid and she says, I'm getting married, and she tilts her head back. Like I remember seeing the trailer, that moment on TV as a kid. Something stood out.
Yes.
What we should have done, because Kimberly Williams, who plays that, married to Brad Paisley, lives here in town. We should have had them come on.
We totally should have invited her.
I know. That would have been just great.
Yeah. We have lots of, in my family, we have lots of lines from that movie that we say.
Oh.
In fact, I screenshot a few and sent them to people in our family last night as I was watching. And one of them is, I met a man in Rome and I'm getting married. And he's brilliant. Yeah, that's one of our favorites. It's very iconic. Yeah. And what's funny is when I think of my kids, maybe because my personality, I don't know, maybe because the way I was parented, I'm not sure. But I've never really wanted to hold on to earlier stages. It's not that I don't, like 3, 4, 5 is my favorite, which surprised me. I didn't expect those to be my favorite years, but and so if I had a place to go back, it would be there. But for the most part, I'm always excited for where we are and what's next. I'm more of a present future thinker than a past, holding on to the past person. And so every year on my kid's birthday when they were little, I would have this little, happy birthday talk with them and just talk about how it's bittersweet, right? And there would always be tears. It's bitter and that it's a little bit sad to leave behind this last year, but it's so sweet because something great is coming, right? You keep getting more interesting and becoming more of who you are. And
that sounds like you like your kids.
I do. I like them so much.
Yeah.
They're my favorite people.
I think that that's something that really shines through in the movie too, is that everybody in their family genuinely likes each other.
Yes.
And I think,
yes,
like when Leigh-Ann and I got married, we both closed out our vows with "I love you" and "I like you," and
I love that.
Total ripoff from Parks and Recreation, but it was just something that was so meaningful to us, and I think that there is a security in that, because I think it is possible to love somebody and not like them.
Yeah.
I think it's not possible to love somebody and not like them and to not have that show.
Right.
I think it screams out of somebody when that's the case.
Yep.
So I think, to love somebody and like them, there's just this security and acceptance. And I get the sense that George had this, I don't want to say plan, but like an understanding or a framework of how he quote unquote knew that life was going to go and how it was going to go with her.
Yes.
So I can't imagine he would have thought she's never going to get married and she's going to live here the rest of her life.
Sure.
I would guess that he probably thought that the traditional way that this would happen is she'd come home, she'd meet a boy here, she'd start dating, he'd be over for a million dinners.
We'd get to know him as she got to know him.
Yeah. We would date him.
We would date him, yes.
And then we'd move on into that. And that makes me, I didn't expect that I would feel this, but like I had so much empathy for him and identification because Leigh-Ann and I's relationship had an element that was a little bit the same, because we started dating when we were both in grad school in separate cities. And so we weren't in the same town as her parents as we were dating. And so I did meet them before I proposed. I did ask them, may I have your blessing, all of this stuff. But there wasn't what I would say George's framework of a development of this relationship would be. And it makes me think he just got hit with a tidal wave of change. And that leads me to a question that I had written down that I wanted to ask you. What type do you think George is, and what type do you think Annie is?
I think George is a 6.
Ah, okay.
You don't?
No, I didn't have one in my head.
Yeah.
I didn't have one in my head.
I think, well, I didn't know the Enneagram when I met George. So I've known George a lot longer than I've known the Enneagram. But yeah, I think he's a planner. I think he's warm and funny. I think he's really imaginative, sometimes to his detriment, right? Because all through this movie, it's worst case scenario, right? When he talks about Brian, he always goes to the worst case scenario.
He keeps watching America's Most Wanted to see if he shows up on things.
And he thinks he's probably really unemployed, and he's probably 46, and he clearly has an active imagination. He's so loyal. I mean, the people in that house are his world.
Mm-hmm.
And he likes things to be planned out.
I probably as a 6.
I see him as a 6. Oh,
Yeah.
He's amazing. I would think you'd be thrilled to
the
be identified
quality
with
that I
him.
thought of as you were saying that is like, and I think this is true for me, I'm okay with change as long as I'm prepared for the wave.
Right.
And so that's what I was saying is I can't imagine he didn't see her getting married, but to get hit in the face with, I met a guy, we're getting married, he's coming over in an hour. Like all this stuff's, and I want to get married in January, which I think Martin Short's character said was 5 months or something like that. Yeah.
5 months.
Yeah. Which we got engaged, and we were only engaged 6 months. We got from one knee to 2 rings. That was a 6-month process, February to September.
Wow.
But I would imagine and that's why I said earlier, if he'd have been given time to walk around the block
I agree.
for 3 hours, he'd have probably had a better handle on it, because every plan would have been made, everything would have been anticipated.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably right. He probably is a 6.
But that shock that I talked about,
Yeah,
right?
it's getting caught off guard.
So caught off guard, and now what? And not only am I shocked, but that has collided with the plans that I had for how this was going to go. I think one of the things, again, when you think about parenting adult children, when your kids are little, you have no choice, if you're going to think about your children's future, but to imagine it. You don't know what they're going to be like. You have no way of knowing. All you have is your ability to imagine what you think it will be like, which is normal for people to do, right? The problem is that we all struggle to let go of that projection for what is real, right? We become attached to our idea, and so much of that is about who we are as parents, right? Like, I want my children to reflect the best of me. I remember a few years ago, I was, my children have raised me. Children raise parents more than we raise them sometimes. And as I was thinking about what I was frustrated about with my kids, I thought, in a moment of clarity, not only do I want them to reflect the best of me, I want them to be better than I am. I want them to be the idealized version I have of myself. And once I realized that, I realized how unfair that was.
Yeah.
That was not a fair. Again, I wasn't conscious of that. This was a moment of breakthrough to consciousness. But once I noticed that, then I could hold on to that and measure my behavior against that, right? Am I doing that in this moment? Am I really expecting my children to be all the things I wish I'd been, all the things I still hope to be? That's not a fair burden to place on them.
Well, when you were saying about imagining your kid's future, the thought that I had was, you're so limited in even doing that because you're imagining it only considering your experience and your thoughts and feelings. So even in the best case, you're imagining that future being limited to the choices you would make as your kid.
Absolutely.
But I think it was Thoreau that wrote I am large, I contain multitudes.
Yes.
So like the worlds that will be built inside of your kid that you don't
Right.
have access to
Right.
could lead to an infinite amount of choices and possibilities. I mean, what multiverses are created there that, you know, best case scenario for you imagining your kid's future, you know, they could be a million miles away from that and still be the best person
Right.
ever.
Right. But you don't know that when they're young.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Your ability
You can't
to
know that.
hold that, and you're so responsible for them, especially in the early days when they have no ability to be responsible for themselves. And yeah, and because of the way our brains are wired and our socialization is wired, you know, they're evolving the whole time in multiple ways, and their path is their path. You know, I think we think about them as ours, but they don't really belong to us. We steward them, we guide them, we parent them.
The
But
Patriot, Mel Gibson, have you seen that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's the part where his son Heath Ledger, I'm not a child, and he yells
Yes.
back, you're my child.
yes.
Yeah, there's that.
Yes. And of course there's a tension there, right? You are my child. I have to protect you and guide you, and I'm responsible for you. And from the moment you're born, I'm also practicing letting you go.
And you see that tension even played out because, you know, you go from the dinner table scene where she breaks the news to him coming over to then when George and Nina meet Brian's parents, his dad, which I felt like this was kind of out of, there's a couple of things that happen that I feel like are kind of out of nowhere.
Like maybe something was on the cutting room floor to connect it.
Yeah. His dad, Brian's dad, all of a sudden says something like, you know, at some point you just got to let them make their own mistakes and
Yes.
and be their own person. And you can see a face on George again, but like you can see everything in his body rejecting that notion that like, no, I don't have to. I have to protect her and I have to make sure that she makes the right choices and, you know,
Well,
all
he
of
says
these
you have to
things.
trust that you raised them right.
Yes.
And, you know, he's annoyed by that,
Which,
right?
more than likely, he's probably thinking, well, I'm not done raising her.
Right.
Like, there's still more raising to be done. I'm not
Yes.
ready to let her do that yet.
And you know what's so funny about that? As you say that, I haven't thought of this before, but we think as parents, we will get to decide when we're done. I am here to tell you, with an almost 21-year-old and an almost 24-year-old, we do not get to decide.
Who decides?
They do.
They do.
We can try to hold on. We can try to keep our role going. But the truth is they decide. And, you know, I know this with Ian, my almost 24-year-old. He has sort of circled back. When he was 18 and went away, it felt like a breakup. I felt so rejected. He didn't, you know, there's some things he did that maybe he would say he didn't handle very well. But he did what he needed to do. We could talk about his Enneagram type and how that played in, but he sort of circled back. You know, I think he would say, I'm an advisor, a guide, a mentor, a wise person in his life. He trusts me with a lot of things. He asks for my thoughts on things. That is very balanced with his sense of, I am walking my own path. I am having a unique experience in the world. And I have to trust myself, even though I get wisdom from my mom.
Yeah. My mentor, Dr. David Olshine, and he's who married Leigh-Ann and I. He is the director of the youth ministry department at the college I went to. So, like, I met him when I was 17, and very quickly he became like a second dad to me and still is. He does, like, parenting seminars and this kind of thing. And one of the things that he says is, and I'm going to butcher this probably, but he says that the different stages of a parental relationship, he signifies them with C's. And I think there's probably more than 3, but I'm going to remember 3. He said, you know, in the early goings of parenthood, you are in control of your child. So you're making every decision, what you eat, when you go to bed, what you wear, what time you do everything, like you are in control. And you shift into this next stage where you're a coach.
Mm-hmm.
So you're on the sideline, they're on the field, but you're still barking stuff out, you know. So even though they are
in real time.
yeah, even though they're able to make decisions and do things differently, you still have such a heavy influence
Yeah.
that they're still gonna. And then you move from that to consultant,
Yeah.
to where they are away, they're
Yes.
making the decisions, they're living the life, they're doing that, and they will come back to you when they
Yes.
need you.
Yes.
So it goes from total and complete influence and control
Yeah.
to partial influence and control to on an as needed basis. And he used to say that, you know, transitioning from any stage to the next is difficult.
So hard.
And it's made more difficult by an unawareness and an unwillingness to make the change.
Right.
So you can be willing and you can be aware and be doing it badly, and it still counts, and it's still, you know, it's still
Yeah.
going to work.
Yeah.
But if you refuse to acknowledge
That's right.
and you're unwilling to change anything, which I think is where George was at, kind of more towards the beginning, like,
Yes.
and it may be because of the suddenness of the change, like,
Right.
you know,
His expectations were not met, right? And
yeah,
that's always
I've
hard
got,
for
he was
us.
thinking, I've got time for all
Yes.
this. Right now, we're going to resume where we left off.
Right.
And then we'll have time. But the change was brought upon so suddenly
Yeah.
that,
Surprise, you got fired from the coach role.
yeah, he was unaware and he was unwilling. And
Yeah.
that was the struggle. So,
Yeah, I agree with all that totally. I think that's exactly right. And I think sometimes what we see in therapy with parents where there's a lot of trouble is when they have held on. You know, some parents, especially in very conservative environments, would probably tell you that they believe that they should be in control until their children are adults. Maybe 18, maybe when they graduate from college. I mean, of course that's not real, especially if your kid goes away to college. But and you're not with them all day at high school or middle school, or but there's a sense of it is my job to control everything. I had a client once that I asked her, based on what she was telling me about our family of origin, in your family, when do people get to start making their own decisions? She had just taken on her first job as an adult, right? Full salary, benefits, out of college. She said, I'm not sure. So that was a question we kept in the mix of our conversation.
I would wonder, going up the genogram, are mom and dad still under that kind of control?
Yeah.
Like, because clearly something has been modeled
Right.
along the way.
Right. Yeah. So that's an interesting question in families, right? And sometimes there's an intention to hold on to those earlier roles because they think that's what a good parent does. You know, a good parent controls. A good parent continues to coach long after the child needs it. And I think the thing is, if you really raise your kids, and you see this in the movie, if you really have good attachment, right? Everybody's going to make mistakes regardless, but if you really have good attachment, your children will tell you, right? If you can listen, if you're connected, your children will tell you when it's time to let go a little bit more. And your job is to be attuned enough to notice that, attuned enough to yourself to notice what feelings are coming up in you. I'm feeling fear. Hopefully you have some good friends who are supporting you in the process of letting go, so that you can take those steps when the time is right. And yes, it creates fear, right? Every time I let my kids do, move to the next step. And I mean, I
was
don't
going to say,
cling.
that's interesting. You're
I
saying,
don't
I'm going to
cling.
let them move to the next
What I mean
step.
is I don't cling.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm not trying to hold on as they drag me with them, I always feel fear. It always feels too soon. It always feels, it may not be level 10 fear. It might be 1, 2, 3, 4, at the bottom of the scale, but there's always fear because it's change. And because I don't know, they don't have a proven track record yet, right? You can't have a proven track record without experience. You've got to take that leap. You've got to take that step. And
So what are the stakes? I mean, as a parent, what are the stakes in that scenario? Is it that as they move forward, they'll make a bad decision and they'll stumble and fall? Is it that they'll make a decision that's different than what you would have done? Is that they'll drop off the face of the earth and you won't,
you'll never see him again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a couple, well, it's probably all those things. The more aware I become, the more aware I am of my own fear and shame, fear of judgment, fear that
that you're going to judge them,
that I'll be judged.
Oh, okay.
I think I'm not going to give it a percentage. I started to, but I'm not going to. A very high percentage of decisions that we make as parents when we are unconscious are about our own needs, our own desires, our own fears. It's very hard to be a conscious parent and recognize the ways that we want our children to fulfill our own dreams and our own needs, right? And so I've got to do the work of being a grown-up.
Well, that goes back to what you said. I want them to be the ideal version of me.
We all do. I mean, that day I wasn't trying to make some kind of therapeutic breakthrough. I just, like I said, it kind of broke through on its own. But the truth is we all do that. Our children are an extension of us in the beginning. And it's a lot for us to begin to see them as fellow subjects who do not belong to us, who are walking their own path. And I remember, I don't know if it was right after Ian was born or right before, but I remember thinking that he had all the blueprints inside him, right? His blueprints were inside him. I did not have them.
Mm-hmm.
And my job was just to create an environment where those blueprints could unroll and whatever that thing was could unfold, right? That was really hard to hold on to during the day-to-day, right? When homework wasn't done or when choices were made that I would not have chosen for him or friends were chosen that had influence or, sermons were heard at church that maybe that's not what I would have said. So many things, like you said, there are all these different influences. And at every moment, there's sort of this invitation to lay down that ego, that me, mine, I, that craving for control or that fear or that need for approval, right, that we all have, to say, I am entrusting him not only to God, but to himself, right? I want to help him cultivate an ability to know himself so that he knows what the next step on the path is.
I think that's a really great way of saying it, because if you hang out in that control stage too long, you're preventing your kid from accessing, engaging, and knowing their true self.
Correct.
So, I mean, you're really dampening their personhood.
You're crippling them, right?
Yeah.
And we know, one of my favorite things in therapy is to work with people around those very things, right? Ego or false self and true self, and learning to trust yourself, learning to listen to the voice within, which is a great gift that God gives us, is that ability to discern and listen inside. And I think when we control, we steal that from our children. We tell them over and over, do not trust yourself, trust me. Do not trust yourself, trust me. And then they go away and they don't know how to listen inside.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They don't know how. So,
and even in really subtle ways, don't do anything I wouldn't do.
Right. Or overt ways,
Yeah.
right? I mean, a lot of parents literally say that.
Yeah.
And so helping our children cultivate the idea and the ability to say that I'm here to walk a unique path. Nobody else knows what it is. I don't even know what it is. I have to discover that. And to encourage that means that there will be fear. Because, of course, it's easier for me to tell my kids what to do, right? But who has to live with the consequences of those choices?
What's interesting is it's easier for you.
Right. That's what I mean.
It's probably not
me.
easier for them.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's that unconscious thing, right? It's easier for me to say, I will choose, I will be in control, I will dominate you, and then I will feel safe. I will feel calm. I will feel good about that. But that's not loving. It's controlling.
Yeah.
So it does feel risky. It does feel like it takes a lot of courage to parent well and with open hands. And, you know, my kids, I have good kids. I don't mean that they've made a lot of really like terrible choices or anything, but they have made choices that are not what I wanted for them. And, it's been really hard to open my hands and entrust them to themselves and to God. And if I'm in a good place, what I realize is, oh, that's about me.
Mm-hmm.
My feelings about their choices are really so much less about them.
Yeah.
They're fine.
Well, I think it makes me think about something that Dr. Bradley talked about in our marital life cycle class. And she talked about in parenthood, there are hopes.
Mm-hmm.
She was discussing it in the context of if a kid dies before a parent, then it's not just a regular grief, but it's a grieving of the loss of the hopes and the dreams that you had for them as well. And when you just said, you know, the choices they make, they weren't what I would have wanted for them, you know, and you didn't say they weren't what I would have chosen. It just, that kind of, I heard in that a little bit of that parental hope. And so it makes me think, you know, if your kid, when your kid strikes out on their own path, that it's little mini grievings of the deaths of those hopes and dreams. And that's not to say that your hopes and dreams are necessarily better than what your kid has in a hope and a dream for themselves, but they're yours.
That's right.
And if it's yours and you lose it, which is what sadness is, it's a signifier of, well, there's a loss of something that I cared about.
Yes.
If you lose it, you have to grieve it.
Yes.
And grief sucks.
Yes.
And we're all bad at it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, a lot of spiritual traditions will say that the point of life is to die before you die. And I said earlier that, you know, children raise parents as much as parents raise children. And my parenting life has invited me over and over to die to my false self. That letting go of them, the letting go of those hopes, they are many deaths in a way. And
spelled both ways, M-I-N-I and N-A-N-Y.
Yes, that's right.
Homonyms.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think my children have been my greatest teachers in that way.
Have you told them that?
Yeah.
That seems like it would be just such a blessing to hear from a parent.
Yes. Yeah. I really, I do try to tell them things like that very often because it's so powerful for me. The more I receive from them, the more I recognize my own work in light of my relationships with them. It doesn't mean that it's their job to parent me. I don't want to.
Well, I didn't hear you say they've been your greatest parents. They've been my greatest teachers.
Yeah. And what I mean is it's not their job. I'm not looking to them to meet that need in my life. I just think when we're in relationship where we are constantly being faced with the reflection of ourselves, right? Where we are invited to see ourselves as we are, whether we're controlling or we're fearful or we're image conscious or, you know, whatever that is. Our kids have the ability to reflect that back to us. That's what we call pushing our buttons, and we act like they're doing it on purpose. They're not. They're just doing their own lives.
Yeah.
But when we pay attention to that, it does have the power to transform us, just like marriage does, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you experienced that with Leigh-Ann, and so, and you know, Leigh-Ann can really stand up for herself, I'm assuming, or speak for herself, you know. And when our kids are little, they do that in their own way. And if we can realize it's not all about me, my children are being who they are, in relationship with me, then I can receive the lessons that their beingness are teaching me,
Well,
right?
and I would imagine that one of the positive consequences of developing a secure attachment with your kid is that during those moments when the kid begins a transition, they begin to plant their flag and say, this is the person I'm going to be. It creates an environment where, while it may not be easy, it's safe.
Yes.
And like, you don't have to feel like as a parent, I've got to shut that down, but rather maybe, oh, cool. So maybe I can now take the time to understand this and see, it, where they're at, what they're feeling. And is it really a true, this is who I want to be? Or is it just I'm going to rebel right now because I want to be a brat, or because I'm hurt and I want to hurt you kind of thing.
Yeah. And rebellion is really pushing back, right, against an expectation. And when I create more space for them to make their own decisions, there's immediately less rebellion. It's sort of like, oh my gosh, do they even make 2-liter bottles anymore?
Yeah.
Is that weird? I must not.
Like
I don't
of
buy
soda?
those anymore. I know that sounds weird, but I don't buy soda anymore.
Yes, of course they do.
So when it's all under pressure.
In 9 days, I'm going to drink 7 of them.
You are?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, don't tell Leigh-Ann.
Okay.
But like, it's because we've been doing Whole30 this whole month. So this is day 21 of Whole30.
Yeah.
So
this is why I don't have any 2 liters in my house, because I don't buy it like that.
Ooh, so
bring it
we've
home.
got, it's not LaCroix, it's called Bubbly. But
Yes.
it's the same stuff. I got a big old pack of them from Sam's.
Yes.
It's like $7 for 24. And with no added sugars in our diet for 21 days,
Yeah.
those things are sweet. Like, they're great. Whereas day 1, I was like, this tastes terrible.
Right. Isn't that amazing?
Day 21, I'm like, this is
It's
great.
amazing.
This is a grapefruit soda. This is a lime soda. Great.
Yep.
So, of course, 9 days from now when I crack open the Dr. Pepper, I'm going to get the biggest headache, and it's
Yeah.
going to taste like,
You're going to feel bad.
oh, yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be
Love
it's
it.
going to be great.
Well, my point with that was just the pressure, right? Like there's all this
Yeah.
pressure. And when you begin to open that cap and you release that pressure, it's not pushing back against anything.
Yeah,
right?
but the stakes are so high.
They are so high.
That
And I'm not advocating that you have no limits for your kids.
Oh yeah,
right?
I think what I'm thinking is just the empathy of George in that situation where you can see moments where he's got a great relationship with Annie. It's
Yes.
great.
Yes.
But when faced with the suddenness of the change in their relationship, he wants to put the cap right back on that
He
bottle.
does. Yep.
Because I would imagine if he could have sealed it up in a little snow globe and looked at it forever.
Right.
And I think,
Right.
to making that transition, you get this moment, I think it's the night before the wedding, where he's laying in bed and you can see sequentially from birth until
Yes.
she slid down the banister of him remembering moments of her growing up and just probably thinking over her whole life
Yes.
and their whole relationship, until, he can't sleep and he hears a noise and he goes out and she's shooting basketball because she's like, I can't sleep. And then they just have another talk,
There's so much connection between them. Their ability to fight and stay connected, right? There's a lot of trust between them.
There's no cutoffs.
No cutoffs. There's a lot of trust that's been built over the years so that they can stomp their feet and yell and say silly things. And it does not, that rupture is so temporary. That repair is so immediate between them. And
Nobody's worried the other's going to jump in the car, slam the door, and peel the tires
Nope.
out of there.
no.
In their mind, speaking as a 6, worst case is the bedroom door gets slammed.
That's right.
And then 30 minutes later, it opens back up.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because even when this wasn't between him and her, but when she comes up from saying the wedding's off and she slams the door, as soon as he walks up to the door and knocks, she says, come in, Dad.
Right.
It's not this stay out.
Right.
but
Right.
it's just an immediate,
Which is pretty amazing.
come on in.
Right. And then she immediately goes to him and sobs in his arms.
Yeah.
That kind of security, I think, is why we love that movie. We all long for that.
Yeah.
we all want the kind of relationship where we can sob in someone's arms and know we're safe.
Attachment wise, that's the safe harbor.
That's the safe harbor.
Yeah. That's the, I was trying to explain it to a friend the other day, and I said, did you ever take your kid to the playground? He said, yeah. I said, so when you get to the playground and you guys get out the car and you walk up and, you know, your kid's a little enough where you're holding their hand and you get up to the big structures and there's all the cedar chips on the ground, what's the first thing they do? And he said, well, they take off towards the monkey bars or the slide or whatever. I said, yeah. I said, now occasionally did the kid ever just run back up to you, do the weird thing where they like crash into your legs and wrap their arms around your legs and they're there for like a hot second and they run off again?
Yes.
He goes, yeah. I said, that's safe harbor. You know what they're doing is that they can go out and explore and risk as long as they know that you're there to return to.
Right.
And their ability to go out and explore and risk is inhibited if there's a doubt that you'll be there when they get back.
Right. And they'll go further and further out, right, with experience.
Yeah.
And they'll turn back and that question, do you delight in me? Do you see me? Am I okay? And that's what she's doing, right?
Yeah.
She's taking that next loop out that's a little bit further, and she comes back, and he's still there, and he's still safe, and she can touch base with him, and he comes back from that meeting with Brian, and basically says, "I see you, I delight in you, you're safe."
Yeah. And I think, thinking as a loyalist, a 6, when he comes back and has the talk with her and he makes that shift from being an opponent to a proponent, I think it's the ultimate display of loyalty, because he's not thinking to be loyal is to be defensive and protective and to maintain this. To be loyal is to be an advocate for what's best for her as determined by her.
Yeah. Support.
Not by what's determined by me.
Yeah.
So it goes from I'm being loyal by standing as a guard and protecting her behind me,
Yes.
to, oh my goodness, like she just loves him so much and he loves her so much that I've got to fight to now get them back together.
I will support her. I will have her back.
Yes.
I'll be on her side.
Yeah. And that's it's a deeper level of loyalty because it's not selfish.
Exactly.
All of a sudden it's selfless.
That's where he comes back to consciousness, right?
And it advocates for her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want somebody like that on their side?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why 6s make great friends.
I like to think so. So we're watching this movie last night, and you know, having been through a wedding not too long ago ourselves, we kind of were thinking about it through that lens, and then all of a sudden Leigh-Ann jumps to a future lens, and she says something along the lines of like, "Oh, you're going to be a basket case when our daughter's getting married," and she said something like, "You know, you're gonna." Because I know at one point George even says, "Oh, you know, getting married at the church and having the reception at the house, absolutely." And then he goes to a fantasy of in the backyard, picnic tables. He's at the grill and he brings them
Barbecue wedding.
a wife burger and a husband burger or something like that.
Yeah.
And I love how the movie shows that you are so right about him being a 6. How he makes these mental models.
Yes.
So he knows what to expect. So if something doesn't fit the mental model, his radar perks up, and then he can now go into, all right, what do I need to do now? You know, he has these mental models. And so Leigh-Ann, you know, she says something like, I'm either going to not like stuff, or I'm going to push back, or I'm not going to want a wedding coordinator to do all this. And I said, you're absolutely wrong. None of that's true. I'm just going to know the best way to do everything. That's how it'll be. Like, I'll just know the best way.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't go that way, I'll just have to, let them all know.
Right.
That'll be what it is.
I love it. But what will happen in between is that that son, that daughter will raise you, and you will be a different person by the time that happens.
it's one of the reasons why I went LMFT. It's one of the reasons why I love relationships so much. Because every relationship is a variable that if you allow it and you pay the price of vulnerability so that you can get intimacy, that it will change you for the better into a different person. I am not the same person that I was before I entered into a relationship with Leigh-Ann Forsyth, who became Leigh-Ann Treese. I'm not the same person I was before I entered into a relationship with Todd Wormers and Jared Farley. I'm not the same person I was before I entered into a relationship with you. Like it, if you allow it, and I really do think you pay the toll, you pay the price of vulnerability. You show up with your true self. That's what it costs to get intimacy. I mean, if we want to think about it transactionally, which is a great metaphor to think about it in, but like it really can change you, because the multitudes that are within me cannot remain the same if they collide with the multitudes that are within you. They merge. It's alchemy. It becomes something completely different. It is a mystery, and it's a beautiful mystery and process that happens, and it's the messiest thing ever. And
it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to live life that way. And I think as much or more to allow ourselves to be self-aware, to allow those teachers, those friends, those relationships to cause us to look inward about what is coming up in me, what am I learning about myself. It's really transformational. And I don't know that we I heard something the other day about it being solitary work that has to be done in relationship. Right? Like there's this internal solitary work that happens, but it only happens in relationship.
yeah, I think I agree with that. I mean, I think that language that Leigh-Ann and I use is that there's my stuff, there's her stuff, and there's our stuff. And so sometimes, you know, stuff that's my stuff tries to leak out onto our stuff, and sometimes the opposite. If we are, to use recovery language, if we're taking care of our side of the street, then our stuff is easier to manage. But as soon as I stop tending to my stuff, then I can wreck all of the our stuff part.
And if I'm not paying attention, you know, the way that I know I have stuff is often in relationship with you, right?
It's
That's what I mean. I'm not aware of my stuff until I'm in relationship with you.
It's like I said to you when I don't know if we record or not, that I deleted a bunch of podcasts, and I said, oh, well, you're responsible. And I changed it to, well, no, you're the catalyst for, because it wasn't that you instructed me. It wasn't that you forced me.
Right.
It was that something that you said inspired something in me. It sparked something to where then I reflected, and with intention, I made a decision to do, you know, something different. And I think what you're saying is amazing, because relationships do that. It's one of the main reasons why I chose the marriage and family track, because in my worldview, which I'm not saying is the right one, just mine, I think that the majority of the catalyst that gets somebody to come in to therapy, that catalyst took place in the context of a relationship. It was something that happened in a relationship that pointed something out to them, and then they decided, I need a little extra help with this. You know, it wasn't somebody sitting in a room with no chairs or a couch that's all painted white, and they were struck by a thought and a feeling, but it was, you know, all of their variables colliding with other people's variables, and something sparked, and they said, oh, I need. So to have something happen in the context of a relationship that causes a change individually, I think, why not then go back and use those relationships, look at the context, and see what it can further teach us, and then use the relationship in the therapy room to continue to do that as well.
Yeah, I think you know, curiosity is such a big part of that. I sometimes notice that clients are less curious about themselves than I am curious about them. Right? So I'll ask some question and they'll say, I don't know. And they're happy not to know. And I'm like, well, would you like to know? I mean, could you, like, maybe you could think about that or go inside and see what you notice.
Amy Alexander had this beautiful line in a training that I was in one time with her, where she said her job as the therapist was to walk the client into the library, I'm going to butcher it, into the library of their true self and reintroduce them to all the lost volumes that they thought they had to leave behind.
Yeah.
And it's not our job as therapists to make a carbon copy of ourselves.
No.
It's our job to create the space where the client can discover things about themselves. I like to use the language, my job is to help you become the most you can be.
And that is also the job of the parent.
Yes. Yeah.
That is also the job of
Yeah.
the parent. If we can get out of the way, our job is to help our children become the you-iest you they can be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Which even, I think, if you can get out of the way, just even watching you say that sentence, a smile came across your face. I think when you get out of your way, you can take joy in that.
Yeah.
If you can't, then it's something like George experienced at the dinner table at the beginning, and it's utter panic and calamity.
Suffering.
And, yeah.
It is suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say one more thing about the movie that I thought was completely unrealistic, and that is at the reception, how he wasn't there. He had to go out and park the cars, I know, but he wasn't there for the bouquet toss. He wasn't there for the leaving, and I just thought any wedding coordinator worth their salt would not have let that stuff happen without him being there.
Yeah. Yeah. You're fired.
Yeah.
That's why I hired you. That's what you're getting paid for.
Which, I mean, the ultimate sadness, and I would imagine his character would be sad about that for the rest of his life. But then when she calls back from the airport, I think it was this like validation and affirmation that their bond is still secure, that she still loves him.
That reach.
Yeah.
She reached for him.
And that she's going to go, they said they're going to Hawaii. She's going to go to Hawaii, and their relationship's intact, and she's going to come back, and they're still going to have it.
Yeah, and it was amazing to me to think, you know, he did miss so much of the reception, which assumably was hours long. And then it's that conversation's probably not 15 seconds, 20 seconds long. I mean, it's so short.
Oh, yeah.
And it's enough. After missing all of that other stuff, chasing her around the house, basically, it's enough, that reattachment, that reconnection, that repair, that reach. It's enough. And I love Nina's face as she watches that happen.
Yeah. There's a lot of moments in the movie where she does what I'll call the mom smile. The camera will come back to her, and it's this like
knowing,
and it's just this like I'm seeing I don't get that it's achievement or task based, but it's like I get that it's this. She sees him connect with her.
Yes.
She sees herself connect with him, and it's just these moments of like, oh, I'm watching love take place.
Yes.
And it fills me with something, and that is what, as a mom, as a character, that I need, and I'm getting it, and so I am in heaven.
And we see so many women as mothers who will coordinate the relationship between the father and the children, right? The mom is sort of the hub, and she sort of triangulates with the parents and the kids, or the dad and the kids, and makes that relationship possible. And this is a place where she does not do that. I don't think we ever see a scene really where she
never says, go talk to your father, or go talk to your daughter, nothing like that.
She never explains him to, do you know what I mean? Like,
she
really
I love that. Yeah.
lets them work their stuff out. And you also see, now she does give him some tips, right? Like, rein it in, buddy. But she does not get in the middle. And then you see the joy on her face when he gets his need met, Annie gets her need met, and Nina in a sense, gets her need met, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a consequence of that secure attachment. She trusts her people to be her people.
Yes.
And she knows, all right, the bedroom door might slam right now, but that's okay.
Yep.
She knows that's temporary. They'll reconnect.
Yeah.
They'll
She
come
doesn't
back.
ever take control of all of that. And that takes a lot of courage as well, right? And trust, which again, they've built over those decades in that house, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They have something to draw on when something out of the ordinary happens. They've made a lot of deposits in the bank, so to speak, when they, so that they have it there when they need to withdraw. So, yeah.
Well, Alicia, thank you so much for coming on, for doing this.
Yeah. Thank you. It was really fun for me to revisit that movie and obviously a lot of tears because it's so tender and it's been fun to be with you.
Well, it sounds to me like, it being a movie that like just traditionally you've watched, but it sounds like just you as a person in your journey, you now connect with it on more than one way.
Yes.
You connected with it as a kid watching it. You connected with it now as a parent.
Yes.
As a therapist, seeing like the whole family system picture.
Yeah.
And I would say and that's why I always let the guest pick the movie, because then it comes from something inside of you. It comes from something in your heart. So let's say that somebody was listening to this episode and they just are thinking, man, I think I can really connect with her and I would love to see her as a client. How could they get a hold of you?
The best way is to email me. It's allmft@gmail.com.
Okay.
I would give my phone number, but that feels a little too personal.
Okay, that's fine. Well, we'll start with the email. Is there anything else that they can access of yours? Do you have socials? Do you do seminars? Like,
yeah, right now I am trying not to be on the socials too much, although I every once in a while think maybe I should do one for my practice. But really the best way is to email me and then let's talk on the phone. I think
there we go.
15 or 20 minutes of hearing what someone's looking for and really assessing whether I'm the person to help them. I'm pretty good at knowing at this point if I'm a good fit for someone and helping them see that or not. And I also really love when I'm not a good fit, making sure somebody leaves me with a good referral.
Yeah.
That feels really important. If someone makes their way to me, I feel that it's important to pass them some names that could really help. So
if our ultimate goal is to help a person, we're going to try to make a good judgment of, am I the person that can?
Right.
But also part of that help could just be, hey, let me get you to the right person.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
So I take that really seriously too.
Okay. So we'll have them email you. Like I said, thank you so much. It has just been an incredible pleasure and honor.
Thank you.
And I guess we'll just do more supervision.
Yeah. See you soon.
I don't know if anybody is still interested in getting the report on Whole30, but we are 25 days in. There are 5 days left.
Today's almost over too.
And I don't know if growing up that you watched as many cartoons as I did growing up.
Mm-hmm.
But in a lot of the cartoons, if a cartoon character were getting really, really hungry, they always did a gag where they would look at one of their friends and their friend would start to look like a piece of food.
Yeah, of course.
At that point, they would then try to like eat the friend or whatever, and it was
happened
funny,
to Scooby-Doo and Shaggy all the time.
Absolutely. So at this point, 25 days in, what I'm trying to say is everything is looking like bread. Everything is looking like dairy. Everything is looking like sugar. And it doesn't help that like in my workplace, people keep bringing in pizza and donuts.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 5 days, I'm going to eat all the pizza and donuts.
Are you? That's not really the point of doing this.
It's not really the point of doing this, you're right. And also, it will definitely kill me. But if you got to go, then you might as well go with pizza and donuts.
Yeah, that's true. I feel great. I really do. I have a lot of energy. I feel like I've learned a lot about what makes my body feel good. So I've liked it. I mean, I am very excited to eat sugar again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing is, I was saying this to someone today, there's no such thing as just grabbing a snack out the pantry. Like, you got to have everything prepared. And I'm really excited to be lazy with my food choices again.
Hello. Yes, me. I was just telling my mom that I feel like I've spent the last however many weekends have been in this month. I spend the whole weekend thinking about and planning for our meals for the week, grocery shopping for them, and then cooking for them.
Yeah. I will say this. We've been introduced to the wonders of the Lowry bar and developed our own favorite flavors.
Yeah.
I am greatly enjoying... Oh, I had the banana bread one today. That was good. But greatly enjoying the carrot cake. Still with the apple pie. That's great. Those are my two.
I like the cinnamon roll. I've liked all of them except for the chocolate coconut one.
Right. That one's
Yeah.
gross.
I was like, really excited to have chocolate for the first time in like a million years.
I experienced it as if you've ever been in a classroom that has a cork board bulletin board. If you were to walk up with a craft knife and carve off a rectangle of that cork and then just chew on it, that's how I experienced that.
But then you put a pinch of cocoa powder, bitter cocoa powder in it.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, its mouth wrote checks that its butt couldn't cash.
What?
Yeah.
All right, we need to move
That's a
on.
phrase.
Nobody cares
All right.
that much.
So you had a chance. Well, of course you watched the movie. You watch it with me. But you listened to the interview as well. And what the world wants to know is what did you think?
Wow, the whole world?
Yeah.
Wow. I have a lot of expectations to live up to. I have never seen The Father of the Bride until that fateful evening, which we watched it.
Had you heard of it before then?
Yes, I had. I had some friends who really loved it. I had a friend in even elementary and middle school, I'm pretty sure, and she had watched it with her family and loved it. And
What
so
a nerd.
yeah, I feel like it was it's kind of like The Princess Bride that I had heard a lot about. And I watched it. It was when I was in New York and you told me to watch it, and I loved it.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's similar to that in that it had kind of always been in my periphery, but I had never watched it. So I was glad to finally check it off the list. Also, it was so cute and I loved it. And Steve Martin was such a good, George was just such a good character. And I'm very close to my dad. So there was parts of it that was, that were emotional and made me just kind of miss him and whatever. I thought it was really funny when you guys talked about George being a type 6 because I had said during the movie that whenever our future, if we have a daughter, if we get to have children, if that daughter gets married, you will be like George. And you kind of had a reaction at first where you were like, what? No, I won't. And then as you and Alicia talked about George being how he is, the whole time I was just going, yes, that is why you 100% will be exactly like him.
I would like to think that I will be more in touch with my feelings than George was. But also that's what made it an entertaining movie.
Yeah. You'll be less goofy and you'll probably end up in less hijinks, but
I do enjoy a good hijink.
I know you do.
Yeah.
But I think that the feeling will be there, and it'll be one of those things where we get a couple steps down the road and then we realize what's going on and we talk about it, and you are very, very in touch with your feelings. So I don't mean to say that at all. I just mean you will probably have similar feelings as him.
Similar to whenever Brian, is that the groom's name?
Yes.
Yeah, whenever he first came over and George is on the couch with Nina and he looks over and Brian is got his hand all on her knee and stuff. I feel like in that situation I would probably be pretty overt and be like, Hey, man.
You would, yeah. You would. I would be uncomfortable, but
Do
you
you
would
think
call
that's
it
really
out.
appropriate to have your hand on her leg like that when you're first meeting me?
That was a bold move too for him to be
I would
that.
like to, and I'm gonna put this out there. I want you to remember it because I'd like you to sanction it. I'd like you to
Okay.
approve it.
All right.
I'd like to use the phrase "bow down to the king" when we first meet our potential son-in-law.
No,
Can I ask him to kiss the ring?
no.
Okay. All right.
That was such an easy win
Well,
for me.
it never hurts to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
figure.
appreciate you asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That was the biggest thing, or like, I don't know, maybe not the biggest thing, but I just loved listening to that part of you talking about him as the six, because there were just so many things that were similar to you, who I love, and making your mental models and being prepared for things that happen. And you're just the best.
That's true.
And
Categorically.
please don't ever steal somebody's bank statement and jump into a pool.
Ever again?
Yeah.
Or okay, cool.
And then also when you guys were talking about just how well the movie depicted some relationships, like George and his wife, and George and what's the daughter's name?
Annie.
Annie. I also thought it just did a great job of depicting the chaos of merging two families and a couple getting married, and how it's not just as simple as that couple getting married. I guess, I don't know, unless somebody elopes, but I think even then the lifelong process of merging the families is probably not clean.
Well, there is a sequel.
Oh, we got to watch the sequel now,
Father of
because
the
I don't
Bride
know
Part
what
2.
happens. But yeah, I mean, I know, and you talked a little bit about our experience and like how you met my parents. I think it was literally like 2 days after I moved here, because you had,
I thought it was the day after.
because you had flown up, and then we drove down with all my stuff, and then you dropped me off at my apartment with the two girls who I didn't know. And then once we got all my stuff up and I kind of got settled, you left, and I didn't have a car yet, because I didn't have one in New York. And so then Mom and Dad, like 2 days later on the weekend, drove up with it. So anyways, all that to say, they met you after I had already moved here. And I'm sure, I know for a fact that that's not maybe how they would have expected, my relationship to my future husband to play out. Like, I think it would have been similar to what you guys said, where they would get to know you as I got to know you.
Yeah. Which I think that they probably got a lot closer to with your brother.
Yes.
And his wife, yeah.
For sure, yeah.
So not only were they kind
really
of expecting
close.
it, they had gotten it.
Yeah.
And so then here we come along, basically just
ruining everything.
busting all expectations.
No, and it went really well, and there wasn't, I don't mean to say that the whole thing was a giant crazy mess, because it wasn't, but I just think George's, and this movie, and especially seeing George process through what's happening, is such a good depiction of the tough time that families can have. Like,
and that's why I brought it up, is because it just made me kind of reflect and not that I did in the first place, but empathize with your parents, and just, man, this is a tough, not that it's something that they wouldn't want or that they disapprove, but just this is a tough transition, because it's kind of a 0 to 60 in almost no time.
Yeah, for sure. And then, same with your parents. Like, I showed up one Thanksgiving, and I think they knew it was
left.
I know. No, but I just think any family in that situation, I think this is I just like that it depicted the mess instead of making it all into a perfect, because I think some movies can do that, especially when there's a wedding involved. Like, it just seems like it goes smoothly and everybody's happy. They all love the in-laws. They all love the person's marrying. Like, and that's just not realistic. I would bet some money that at least like 98% of families who have to merge have some sort of difficult time, and have feelings about it.
Well, you know what that is? That's just being a person.
Yeah.
And like, I say to my clients all the time, if you put two people in a room together, they're going to hurt each other. It's going to be challenging, just because God had this great idea to give everybody free will, but he messed up when he gave it to everybody outside of me. Like, it would have been such a great, it would have been a better idea if he just gave me free will and everybody else didn't. And that, I mean, that's a joke. That I don't really think that, but I mean that when you have any two individuals, like, you know, you have infinite amount of things inside you that affect who you are and what your choices are, and each person has that, and so inevitably there's going to be clashes, there's going to be conflicts, there's going to be difficulties.
Yeah.
But it counts a ton if a person has humility enough to, you know, circle back.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And just keep trying.
Yeah.
And just the love. I feel like it showed
It's
that
the
really well
emotional
too.
tone. It's the want to. As long as you have the
yes.
want to, then anything's possible.
I like that. And I think that, I mean, that was definitely shown. George loved his daughter so much, and there was he didn't want to with the wedding at first, but he loved her so much it never would have been, he would never have done something to alienate her. You know, that was the opposite of what he wanted.
Yeah.
Which sort of related. The only other thing really was just when Alicia she was talking about her kids and like kind of the process of them growing up and them raising her in a way. She said that I wanted them to be the idealized version of myself. And then she talked about how that wasn't fair, and that was just powerful for her to say. And for me, that was a powerful thought, to think back on, you know, my parents, and even for me in the future, like what that means and what it is that gets just the difference in when the actions of a child do reflect the parent, and then there being a point where that's no longer the case, but how obviously that would be a tough like frame of mind to get out of for a parent. Like if the whole of your child's life has been that their actions reflect on you, it's not like an off button that you can switch off all the feelings that you have when suddenly, like, oh no, their actions don't reflect back on you.
Yeah. But I mean, I think so I've had conversations with clients before where they say that they've built their life upon doing the opposite of what a parent would have done because their relationship with their parent is so tense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really great way to never discover your true self, because you're still being, I don't want to say controlled, but like you're still being influenced by that parent. Your life is still revolving around it because you have to think about what would they do, so I'm going to do the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is a version of that, like desperately wanting your kid to be an idealized version of you. You're limiting them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Alicia was saying too, in that, you know, an idealized version of you is exactly that. It's you.
Yeah. And
I think we both circled back around to wanting to help them become the most them they can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said that a bunch of times before.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that sticks in my head as just this beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's something that I hope to pursue with every client of mine, is just to introduce them to more and more and more of themselves. I don't want to create carbon copies of me. I don't want anybody to look or act or feel or think like me.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to be them. Yeah, I loved that it was a chance to connect with Alicia over a movie that she loved growing up, and that now she's appreciating not as the Annie character, but as the George character.
Yeah, that was really cool to hear. Yeah, that was it.
That was it.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, the next episode that we wrap up, we will not be on Whole30. So I think that we should do it while we're eating hamburger in one hand, pizza in the other, and holding an ice cream cone with our feet. On that note, we're going to go ahead and raise the lights, because at least for this week, the theater is closed.